That's right, folks. The season might be done, but my God, we can't stop. Another way too early mock draft starts right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel.
What up, Razzballers? Welcome back to the program. Welcome to almost 2024 in football terms. Let us be the amongst the final to wish you a happy new year and blessings to a 2024. Hope you brought in those hashtag Razzball titles. I know we got a few of them here on the panel, and we took down a number of our titles. Hope you did as well. For tonight's episode, we're going to be breaking down, as Bob said, a way too early mock draft for 2024. We're just going to do the first round tonight. So we're going to be breaking this down all off season, all summer long. So you're going to get plenty of player analysis and recaps and pickups to mock drafts heading into the season. This will be redraft focused, not dynasty. We got a dynasty crew waiting for you on their own show, the Dynasty Diehards. So make sure you go check out their shows. We're going to do a redraft PPR 12-team league, just the three of us tonight. So we're going to have picks from Derek, picks from myself, picks from Bob. And we're going to walk you through who we think are our top 12, and we're going to discuss it individually. Of course, before we do that, make sure you follow everything Razzball at Razzball Fantasy on Twitter. And, of course, myself, Sky Guasco, Derek_Favret, and Bobby Marco on Twitter as well. Gentlemen, how are we doing? Let me get 10 seconds or less on how the championship week went. And a spoiler alert, I know Derek had a pretty good weekend. How you doing, my man?
Yeah, doing well. I can do it in less than 10 seconds. Here, let me just change that right there. Compliments of the Razzball Writers League champion.
That's a sleeper goat, I believe. Is that correct?
That is the goat. Yes. So yeah, that's an indicative of my week.
Boy. And the Guillotine League champion as well.
Down the Guillotine League as well. 18-team
nice
Guillotine
work.
League.
Congratulations.
First time ever doing a Guillotine League, and I took it down. So that was a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Awesome, man. Congratulations. We got to have a listener Guillotine League next year. I'm excited about that.
Sorry, Sky. I'm trying to vibe with you right now. You're a little delayed. I'm trying to get in there. I don't know. It's my turn. We're good. Yeah, fantasy football is great. I got 3 titles so far. I have 1 more left. That's a best ball league that goes through week 18. I'm 3 points behind first place to win. So if I have a big week, I can win that one. So I'll be 4 out of 9 leagues with a championship this year. Didn't win any of the big money leagues, unfortunately, but I still won enough to, make some money. So that was cool. Really excited there. But overall, good season. Very good season.
Congratulations, my man. All right, let's dive into it here then. We got right into the top 12 picks. Who was one player when you guys were looking at your top 12 off the bat, preparing for round 1, that really stood out that you didn't expect to be in your top 12? Do you have a player that was either auto top 12 and he didn't make the cut, or was there a player that fell in that you didn't expect to be there? Derek, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I think I think he's safe in being in there, but really Jahmyr Chase is a player that concerns me. He was like top 2 or 3, this past year. I think he still makes the top 12 in pretty much every league next year. He'll be healthy. Burrow will be healthy, but I wouldn't be surprised if he slips down to the 7, 8, 9, 10 range. So that was a little surprising to me when I started shaking out names that he was kind of in that area for me. So, but I think again he's still comfortable number 1, top round pick, but I think he's going to be a value for someone in that 8, 9, 10 slot next year.
Bob, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think really when it came down to it is looking at guys like Raheem Mostert and Alvin Kamara types where they're in. Like if you look at a PPR points per game basis, those guys would have been difference makers this year and should be considered, but they're not going to be. Maybe Kamara in the 3rd round, maybe 2-3 turn. I could see people talk about aging and all that stuff. And, they have Kendra Miller. And then Mostert, I could find ourselves in the 6th round next year because Devin Achane, and he's going to be the new Fred Jackson. If you guys have been playing fantasy football for well over a decade, you remember Buffalo Bills, Fred Jackson. Everybody wanted CJ Spiller. He was the first round pick. And then well into his 30s, like 34, 35 years old, Fred Jackson was producing for fantasy. And I could see Raheem Mostert being that guy, especially with the low mileage in his 20s.
Yeah, that's the biggest point there, Bob. He didn't have so much work in his early first 5-6 years due to injury and just not getting the opportunity and things. So he is older, but he doesn't have the wear on the tires. Then there's guys who aren't that old, Derrick Henry, who just has mileage and mileage and mileage. So obviously he's a unique specimen, but love that. All right, boys, well, let's get right into it then. We do have a mock draft set up here. I'm going to share my screen. And again, if things get wacky with my stream, you guys just yell at me and I'll switch things up best I can and get it rolling here. We're going to throw it in here. So everybody watching here on the YouTube channel, please disregard second round down. We're not doing all this. We're just using Sleeper, not a sponsor, but it's a great program for us to use for mock drafts right now. We're going to be using all sorts of different platforms over the off season and into draft season. But for this, we're just going to simply set up our mock draft. So we're going to have some mock drafts coming up, though, that are going to be with you, the listeners, the followers, the supporters. So those of you, Daniel, Jamie, I know you're in the chat already, and a lot of you have been following us throughout the season. Be on standby. Give us a comment right now if you'd be interested in joining us in a live on-air mock draft throughout the off season. We'll pencil you in and we'll give you a shout out and a heads up when it's going to be participation from you all too, so that we can get your feedback in the moment. Before this first one, it's just going to be the three of us. I know that Jamie wants a piece of that. I'm sure Daniel does as well. The rest of you following along, please let us know that you would be interested. Okay, we do have a couple of comments, so we're going to dive into those here pretty quickly. But before we do that, I want to just kind of give the rundown of what we're going to do for the mock draft, and then we will bring you guys in. So again, this is a 12-team redraft. I know it's dynasty season, but we're not quite done with redraft, and that's what we do on our programs here. So 12-team PPR, full PPR redraft. So Bob, myself, and Derek are going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to do the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 picks as well. Whoever's on the clock will make that pick, and that their pick stands for a mock draft. And then the other two of us will give either, agreeing with that or disagreeing and why. So that'll be pretty self-explanatory. Before we get into it, let's drop a couple questions in here. Thanks, Quad Fathers, for all the help given this season. Just want to give you all a shout out, especially Bobby with the clutch Kayami Fairbairn pick for the win. Bob, I got to give it to you too. Most of the kicker picks made it happen. Some of them fell flat, but you can't predict kickers necessarily on the negative. But you came up huge in championship week. I actually dropped Brandon Aubrey and Jason Sanders, I believe. And I picked up Kayami Fairbairn in both those leagues, and they had massive opportunities. So well done, Bob, on the Kayami Fairbairn pick. That is our kicker guru. Well done. Jamie, never too early for a mock draft. I'd start real drafting if they were open. I think we agree with you too, man. We're ready to go. Quick question. Week championship finals. That's not exactly a question. I think that's more of a comment there. But we agree. Do not have your championship in week 18. The main reason, folks, and I'll run this down throughout the draft, there's 14 different quarterbacks who are backups playing this week. 14 backups are playing this week. Not good for your championships. Try to move those up next year if you can. Want a piece of Jamie in the Guillotine League? I'll donate my money. Derek, can you take down Jamie next year in the Guillotine League?
Bring it on, Jamie. Bring it on.
Bring it on. Love that. We got a mock draft. We are ready to go. Let's make it happen. Derek, you're going to be on the clock first, my man. Then we're going to go to the boss at number 2. I'll follow it up here on the 3 pick. And then we're not going back to back at 3. We'll just let Derek take the 4. Bob will take the 5. I'll take the 6, and so forth. So without any further ado, let's make it happen. Now, a couple caveats. We're expecting full health heading into 2024. We're going to do like 50 mock drafts, folks. So don't hold us over the fire with these picks yet. A lot of recency bias in here, of course, but coaching changes are going to happen. The draft is going to happen. Aging veterans are going to fade out. Guys are going to get traded. Free agents will move and get picked up. Things will change the summer, but we're anxious to look ahead and recap quickly. So we're expecting full health with these players and the players around them, maybe a couple predictions along the way as well. So again, full PPR 12 team. Let's rock and roll. Derek, you're on the clock right here. Who is your number 1 pick in 2024 full PPR?
Yeah, give me this year's MVP, Christian McCaffrey. Leading the league in rushing attempts, rushing yards, second in running back receiving yards, slightly behind Breece Hall, and then of course leads all running backs in total touchdowns. How could you start a draft next year in a PPR without taking Christian McCaffrey?
Hard to go against him, Bob. I'll let you counter if you have one.
He was my 101 this year. So I must have said this like 3 or 4 times preseason. So if you were going to draw up the perfect fantasy football player, it would have, like 4 years ago, you would have said, give me Christian McCaffrey with Kyle Shanahan. That was my justification at 101 all year. And he delivered, and I will not be changing my mind next year unless there's like an injury to Brock Purdy or something or him.
I will caveat that, though. A couple of years ago, I had the top pick, and I picked McCaffrey, and that was the year he got hurt and he just underperformed. And, you really felt solid going in, and it just didn't produce. It was that, that historical thing where, you take your top pick and they just don't live up to to that pick, and it just really ruins the rest of your team because you build around that 1-1 pick. And so I'd say that with a little bit of concern because of just the personal history there. But, again, if you've got that number 1 pick, I can't see how you can pick anyone but him personally.
Can I say one other thing too, is that, just sorry to cut you off, Scott, but like Elijah Mitchell, if you draft CMC at 101, you cannot leave that draft without Elijah Mitchell. Just have him on your bench if you can. Like, I know there's shallow leagues where you only have 5 bench spots. Honestly, you're never going to sit McCaffrey until his bye week, which could be weeks 9, 10, 11. And so that one spot you should dedicate to his backup, because if he does go down or misses time, Elijah Mitchell has proven to be a borderline RB1 himself. Of course, you're not getting the elite RB1 ceiling of Christian McCaffrey because he's used in the passing game, but you could still get it. You won't bottom out because you lost McCaffrey if you have Elijah Mitchell to back him up.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the only, Derek, to your point there, we can't predict injuries. So I know that sucks when it happens, but throw that out there. I did that with Adrian Peterson back in the day. I got the 101 pick, picked AP, and he got hurt immediately, and it bombed my season. It happens. But think about the other people who picked Justin Jefferson this year 101 over Christian McCaffrey, right? They're those people that missed out on the 101 pick because he was dynamite. He got hurt. Cousins got hurt. The rest is history. So you got to shoot your shot. When healthy, he's going to get the most workload, the most opportunity. He's arguably the best physical specimen at the running back position outside of Derrick Henry with overall athleticism. So hard to not go with Christian McCaffrey. The only concerns are going to be workload, health, and age, but the guy's on another sphere, of course. So 101 pick here, not a lot of contrary to this pick, but you could go with another name or two at number 1 if you're concerned about it. But Christian McCaffrey, certainly safe and sound. Bob, who is your 102 at this point?
I'm going to say this. If it's a 3-receiver league, this is an auto pick for me. It's going to be Tyreek Hill. If you're in like a 2 running back, 2 wide receiver in a flex league, those running backs are just at a premium that you could consider maybe a Kyren Williams type or a Gibbs or Devin Achane. But I think Tyreek Hill proved this year that he's in a league of his own. Tua proved that he could stay healthy. The other thing I love is that he fell short of 2,000 yards. I love the fact that he was planning to get 2,000. He has a little injury at the end, not a little injury, but he has an injury. He's going to fall probably maybe 100 yards short of that goal. He wants to come back now and play again next year and prove everybody he can get that 2,000 yards. So I love the motivation. Tua will be back. Mike McDaniel's not going anywhere. So you got to love that too. And Waddle has proven to be clearly a way, way behind him at number 2. So I love Tyreek Hill as the 102 pick here.
Ooh, even after the season, Bob throwing Waddle shots. Love to hear that. Derek, thoughts?
Yeah, well, if I'm sitting at 4 like I am right now, I love Bobby taking that pick because he's one of those players that I don't really want him as my number 1. I understand the reasoning that Bobby had, and I don't disagree with it per se, but he's not a player traditionally I want to build my team around in a redraft. So I'm happy right now sitting at 4 that Bobby took him, because there's a couple other wide receivers that I like a little better.
Yeah, I have Tyreek Hill actually as my 3 in this pick, but surprising to some, I'll go with my top pick here and my number 3. I'm actually quite thrilled to get Ceedee Lamb at 1-3 right here, who actually is my top wide receiver, and actually he's my number 1 player. Let me set this quick. Give me a second. Try to talk through it with my computer delay. Whoop. Oh, I like the little sound in the background. Love that. So Ceedee Lamb at number 3 here. Now, I'm okay with Tyreek Hill as my number 1. I'm great with Christian McCaffrey, obviously. For me, in a full PPR league, though, Ceedee Lamb of these 3 gives me the least amount of concern, right? Tua goes down. He stayed healthy this year, which is great. But the expected fantasy points for Tyreek Hill to what he actually got, as dominant as he was, he had 120 fantasy points potentially left on the field. Overthrows, underthrows, drop passes, missed touchdowns, whatever. Ceedee Lamb and Dak Prescott are just absolutely electric, and they're both young, and they're going to be, I think, dynamite for a number of years. And Ceedee Lamb now has put himself in that upper echelon for sure to stay. The only thing he needs is more touchdowns, which I think he'll get as the focal point of this offense, depending what they do in the run game. So I actually have Ceedee Lamb as my 101 right now, ahead of Christian McCaffrey in full PPR leagues. As a Niner fan, breaks my heart for a Cowboy, but I'll put that aside for the people. But Ceedee Lamb is my number 1. So to get him at not 1, not 2, but 3, I'm thrilled for that. But I have Ceedee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey, and Tyreek Hill as my top 3 picks. So far, I love the top 3, and I'm actually thrilled to get Ceedee as my 3rd pick. You guys obviously have 2 other guys ahead of that. With Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill off the board, if you guys were in the 3rd spot, would Ceedee be your guy? Or Derek, if it's somebody different, you can go ahead and pick your 104 now.
Yeah, I do like that pick. Ceedee Lamb is, if I remember, he was kind of falling in the, 9, 10, 11, 12 range, this year. And he's certainly shown, that he belongs in this, the top, 3 to 4 wide receivers for sure. Going into next year, Dak has, elevated his game as well. So I think you're feeling pretty comfortable with Lamb as your wide receiver 1, even this early. So I like the pick. Let me toss it to Bobby here before I make my pick. Do you have any comments on the Lamb pick?
Nope. Most dominant player over the second half of this year, was extremely good, but it's also the continuity. Dak will be back. Mike McCarthy, most likely, as long as nothing crazy happens in the playoffs, should be back. And we always talk about this system continuity. I love the fact that Brandon Cooks is there. You're not going to have to worry about too much. He plays the slot, which gets him away from top corners. So you got to love all that. So I agree with this one.
Yeah, and I fully expect the Cowboys to go and grab either in the draft or even add someone like a Mike Evans or another wide receiver of rising towards that ilk to add on the other side of Lamb. It's going to make a powerful weapons for Dak. So it's not going to affect Lamb. So I just think his arrow's still pointing up, and this is a good pick here.
Absolutely. Still young. And again, we're not talking dynasty, but he's my dynasty number 1 as well, ahead of Jefferson and Chase right now, just based on their situations and what we've had the last couple of weeks. But Lamb led the NFL in targets, 168, also receptions, 122. He was 2nd in PPR points per game behind only Tyreek Hill, and receiving yards behind Tyreek Hill, and touchdowns behind Mike Evans and Tyreek Hill. Dak just hyper targets Ceedee Lamb as well. I love to see that, obviously. And who knows what's going to happen in the run game. Everyone was excited, me especially, about Tony Pollard. It didn't really come to fruition. Zeke is still doing better than Tony Pollard, even in New England, in a backup role in a bad offense. So we'll see what happens in the run game there, but I expect this to be more of the same next year coming in, and Ceedee Lamb would be my number 1 player, number 1 wide receiver. Thrilled to get him in the 3 spot. Let's go ahead and move on. We got CMC, Tyreek Hill, Ceedee Lamb is our top 3 picks. Everybody paying attention here, and I know the podcasters are after the fact here, but everybody live on YouTube right now, go ahead and give us a comment. Let us know if we missed anybody in your top 3. Now, this is not super flex, so we don't have any quarterbacks. This is a single quarterback league, but PPR, if we missed any of the top 3, go ahead and comment those below. Without any further ado, let's get into the 4th pick here. Derek, this is your 2nd pick. This is 104 on the board here in a redraft PPR single quarterback league.
At 104 in a PPR, I'm still looking at wide receivers. I'm not jumping at a running back yet. And as much love as we just gave to Ceedee Lamb, he's actually 2nd on my board, wide receiver wise. So I'm thrilled here at 04 to get Justin Jefferson. And I will caveat that in saying, it does, picking him right now at 104, I fully expect the Vikings to re-sign Kirk Cousins. I think he's shown he's a team player. The fans love him. The organization loves him. He'll be healthy coming in. And I think just what we saw of the Vikings before and after his injury, I think it just proves that the Vikings and Kirk Cousins is a winner. And I think they want to give this team a run with him at the helm, because I think I get the impression they feel that they can go a long way. So I'm fully expecting Kirk Cousins to resign, and assuming he does, I love having Jefferson at 104 here, 1.04.
Bob, thoughts?
The Cousin thing is a little worrisome because of the ACL tear. The thing is, Jordan Addison's now in the picture. I know Adam Thielen was around too when Justin Jefferson was elite. The one thing I will say is we talk about this all the time. I mean, maybe the quarterback situation won't be as big of a problem because it's quarterback, but it does worry me that, Kirk Cousins won't be 100%. Now, Nick Mullins has shown if he is the backup for next year that he's willing to sling it. He threw for 400 yards just a few weeks ago. But at the same time, Jefferson hasn't been consistently showing that ceiling. So if I'm here, I would take a different player personally. And there's a running back that I really like that I'll take with the next pick, but I'll get Sky's insight about Jefferson first.
Jefferson right now he's my 10th player in my top 12. And Derek, it clearly, if he's healthy, Cousins is back and they run this back, then I'm going to move him probably in my top 5 automatically. That's not the case now. And I know we're, 6 months or whatever from draft season. But currently, I don't think Kirk Cousins comes back. I just don't. There's a lot of money issues there. Yes, he is a team player. We know that. But then he'll be coming back from injury. Justin Jefferson was really beat up this year as well. Addison, I should say, Jordan Addison is clearly the distant 2 behind Jefferson, but he's maybe shaping into a number 1 in his own right on a different team if he were there, like a T. Higgins, for example. So I think he gets a lot of work. Hawkinson will be back late in the season, right? So he's not going to be there to take away targets because of the ACL. Who knows what's going to happen in the run game? And also the Vikings defense got so much better in the second half. Maybe they go back to leaning on the run a little bit more. We'll see. So love Jetta's obviously if he's healthy, if Cousins is back. He was a top 7 wide receiver in the first 4 games, he and Cousins. Then he had a dud, and then he missed a month plus. And then Cousins got hurt, and the rest is history. He was a wide receiver 36 or worse after week 4. Now, obviously, throw that out because of Cousins and backups and hurt, whatever, but it does matter. So right now, he's my 10th player overall, my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th wide receiver. But a lot of that will change if Cousins does come back. So right now, he's out of my, top 5 wide receivers, but we'll see what happens. So Jetta's obviously a top dog, was the number 1 pick for a lot of people last year, but right now he's our 4th pick for Derek there. And Bob, you are on the clock, 105.
Yeah, believe it or not, I'm going Kyren Williams here. We kind of caught a glimpse. Listen, Sean McVay has proven that he wants to have a workhorse. There's not a lot of coaching staffs that have proven to show that they'll lean on a single back to completely dominate touches. And when you get an opportunity to have a guy who, number one, listen, Cam Akers, we'll never know. Him and Sean McVay had a problem. But when Akers was the guy last year over the second half, he dominated 16 PPR points. Kyren Williams over the second half of the year averaged 24 PPR points per game. You know who else did that? Todd Gurley. Like Todd Gurley used to do that. So he was a full-time player in an offense, by the way. They figured out the offensive line. Matthew Stafford looked healthy. Now you're going to have Cooper Kupp, another, hopefully healthy, not dealing with his hamstring, with Puka Nacua as well. And DeMarcus Robinson. I mean, like, how could you fade an offense with DeMarcus Robinson on it right there? So just 50%, only 3 running backs this season. 50% of their games were considered elite. So that's 21 PPR points. CMC, Devin Achane, Kyren Williams. So he gives you that consistency of elite upside every week. You really can't pass that up. I love it. I would go Kyren Williams here.
God, can we just have a moment of silence for Todd Gurley? Like, probably the best 2-year stretch in fantasy football history, outside of maybe Lev Bell. But boy, that went down. Oh yeah, but LT was LT for
different guy.
8 years of fantasy, bro. Like, Todd Gurley was the best by a lot for 2 years and fell off a cliff, unfortunately. So shouts out to our boy Todd Gurley, good friend of the show. Derek, thoughts on Kyren Williams here?
Yeah, Kyren Williams was on both of my championship squads, so I do have a soft spot for him. But that being said, this is a risky pick, I think. I love him as a player, and I think he's going to do real well. But as the 5th overall pick, there's a lot of risk to me in that. Just frankly, any running back outside of McCaffrey, in the top 5 is risky. I do like the move. I like the guts, but I probably not going that way in as a number 5 pick. I do love the player though. I would if I was later in the draft, or later in the picks, I'm hoping like hell he slips down to me, and now that Bobby just sniped, then I would be pretty mad. But but at 5, I'm probably not going that way.
Boom. Jamie coming in. What? I thought I missed like 5 picks when I heard Kyren Williams. So Jamie's got him a little bit lower than you do, Bob. But Bob, I got your back. I have 2 running backs ahead of him. I'm going to pick one of them here in a second. But Kyren Williams is in my top 6. He is my 4th running back right now in PPR. 2nd in rushing yards, folks. And he missed a handful of games. But he was 2nd in rushing yards, right? 14 total touchdowns. He missed 4 games. 9 out of the 12 games that he played, he was a running back 1. So he's a top 12 running back in 2/3 of the games that he played. No competition as of right now in that backfield, right? Now, I would be shocked, honestly, if the Rams don't get a day 2 or 3 running back or 2, or a free agent. But it's obviously his backup. And this is what Sean McVay wanted to do with Cam Akers and didn't work out, as Bob mentioned there. So draft pending, that's kind of maybe why I don't have Kyren Williams higher yet. But look, man, we might have a big blow up with him in the playoffs for the Rams if they make it, like we did last year with Cam Akers coming on strong, and it just didn't work out before he got shipped out. So Kyren Williams, I like a lot. I've got him though as my 6th pick right now, and I've got him as my 4th running back, but a lot to be decided depending on what the Rams do in the actual playoffs. So Bob, I like that. It's a sneaky pick, and I don't think Kyren Williams is on people's radar as of right now. So I'm going to go with my pick here, and let me get it in before I give my analysis. And again, might have some delay here. Give me 1 second. All righty. I'm going to go with my boy Jahmyr Gibbs as my number 2 pick here personally, and I've got him at 106. I'm thrilled with this. For the second time here, you guys have picked guys ahead of this. In my personal rankings, I'm getting a discount on Gibbs. I've got him at number 4 overall. I'm getting him here at 6. I'm thrilled about that. I know everybody was on the Bijan train coming in, rightfully so. So was I, but I didn't fade Jahmyr Gibbs. The only concern there was what the Lions offense was going to look like and how much is David Montgomery going to take away from him. Even with David Montgomery, 1,233 total yards and 10 touchdowns for Jahmyr Gibbs. He didn't even get really rolling until week 7. So from week 7 on, he was a top 3 running back in PPR 6 of the 10 games, scoring all of his touchdowns in a 7-week period. I think he's the new Alvin Kamara, personally. Watching him run, watching him play out of the backfield, he just gives me that kind of vibe. I think next year he becomes the bona fide number 1 with David Montgomery spelling him versus the other way around. We saw that in the second half of the season, and I just think this offense now is not just ground and pound. Goff can move the ball. They're going to do it through the run game, through the air, and Jahmyr Gibbs is just so much more of a home run hitter than David Montgomery. So I think he gets a lot more work next year. And again, didn't really get going. He played 4 games. He got injured, and then he was kind of back and forth with David Montgomery until week 7. But after that, he had 4 top 3 finishes down the stretch, including 2 in the first and second round of the playoffs, which we love in fantasy football. So Jahmyr Gibbs for me at 106 is a steal, in my opinion. I've got him as my second running back behind only Christian McCaffrey, and I've got him 4th overall on my big board currently. So I'm getting a bit of a discount. Bob, will go to you first here with your reaction, and then we'll go to Derek for his 3rd pick.
Well, a lot of that, the wild reason why Gibbs here is he started in week 7 is that's when David Montgomery got hurt, right? So David Montgomery missed 2 games. He got hurt in week 6, missed week 7 and 8, and Gibbs got an opportunity to take over, and he was great down the stretch. He was. Now, the only thing I would say I'm a little worried about with Gibbs is what happens if Ben Johnson leaves. Like we've seen a lot of times when their OC change happens, they drop the bag, a la the Eagles this year, where Jalen Hurts didn't look as good as he looked last year. So I am a little I do agree that you have Dan Campbell in place. He was there in New Orleans when they had that Kamara Mark Ingram duo, which is great. But with Sam Laporta emerging behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jameson Williams has really perked up too over the last second half of the year, I still think he's going to be the 1B back for carries behind David Montgomery because they love Montgomery. That being said, you got to love the upside. And in PPR formats, I get it. I would say that I might be a little lower on him than a 6, but I can see why you'd go this high.
Derek, thoughts on Gibbs, and then go ahead and give us your 3rd pick.
Yeah, I actually agree pretty heartily with everything Bobby just said, especially the fact that the offensive coordinator is probably going to get a head coaching job somewhere, and that offense, as much as we want to think it's going to just carry and grow, probably is going to look a little different. And maybe that benefits Gibbs, but I'm kind of thinking that maybe it doesn't. But this is really the window in the first round, at the beginning of the window, that I expect that he's going to go. So I kind of had him in the 6 to 8, 6 to 9 range as well. So it's right there where we're I expect someone to reach up and grab him, and I don't blame him, but like Bobby just said too, I'm probably not going. He's probably a little bit lower in the first round for me as well.
Okay, fair enough. Give us your 3rd pick here, which would be 107.
Yeah, so if I'm sitting at 7, I'm actually really happy with your last 2 picks, running backs, because and Jamie, take notes when we go in the Guillotine League next year together. I'm in a PPR. I'm looking at trying to get one of those very top wide receivers in the first round. I just trust them more. And right now, Ja'Marr Chase is sitting out there with a healthy, Burrow coming back, we expect. And Cincinnati, they've got work to do, to build that team, but I really expect them to kind of bounce back, from what we expected from them all along. So at 7, I'm ecstatic to get Ja'Marr Chase here.
All right. I'm going to give feedback here first, and then Bob, I'll let you reply and go ahead and give us your 3rd pick here as well. Chase, again, similar. I have a similar feeling with Chase and Jefferson right now. Burrow comes back 100% healthy. We see what happens with T. Higgins, see what happens with Joe Mixon, this offensive line, yada, yada. The Bengals look like the Bengals should have this year. Ja'Marr Chase is probably in my top 5 or 6 also. As of today, though, he's actually ahead of Jefferson for me because of T. Higgins most likely leaving. But Chase is my 8th overall pick, and he's my 3rd wide receiver. Wide receiver 10 in PPR with 1,200 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns in what felt like a down year. So I love that, absolutely. But so much of this has to do with Joe Burrow. That being said, obviously they did great with backups all around. Like the Bengals are still playing high level. I just feel like when a player like T. Higgins departs, yes, it looks good on paper, like more work for Chase, whatever, but like, can he get more work? I think it's more of like it might draw more attention to him because who's going to be that number 2, right? It's not Tyler Boyd, and are they going to draft a youngster or whatever? So sometimes I worry about that a little bit, and I just, I got Tyreek Hill and Ceedee Lamb ahead of them, and maybe Jefferson, AJ Brown, St. Brown's, things like that. So we'll see what happens. But I love Ja'Marr Chase as a player. Just have more to see currently. But at the 7 pick there, if you're actually on the board and that's your first pick, it's safe. But we thought that last year when he was in the top 4, and it became kind of risky once he got injured for a while, and then Joe Burrow did as well. So for me, that's about the range I would have him, because he's 8th overall for me. You got him at 7. So I like the value there. But I would have picked 1 or 2 players before him in that particular spot if I were back on the board. Bob, your thoughts?
Ja'Marr Chase. I mean, we all know it's there. It's all there. The elite quarterback, Joe Burrow. The passing offense, by the way, I talked about this in the preseason. Down the stretch of last year, they finally had the pass volume. They actually rivaled Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in terms of pass volume last year. And that's what you really need to elevate into the top number 1 overall receiver. You need a pass-happy offense. And they had that with Burrow. But it just seems like every year something happens. Chase gets hurt. Burrow gets hurt. I don't feel like we have seen it all together yet. And if T. Higgins does walk, you got to think his target volume is going to be safe. So I'm okay with this. I would go one other direction. It'll be my next pick. I just think there's another player in full PPR formats. It's a lot safer. But at the same time, Chase is like, we know he could be the number 1 receiver in fantasy. But when is it going to happen? Like, come on. So I think he's okay. He's an okay first-round pick, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's good thoughts. Bob, go ahead and give us your 3rd pick here, and that'll be 1-8.
Yeah, it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think I understand the Ben Johnson stuff. We can make the same argument here, but it's just like he is the centerpiece of that offense. And by the way, this season, he kind of dealt with some injuries early on, but we saw down the stretch. I know Ceedee Lamb gets all the highlights because he had that monster game, but when it comes to being elite every single week in the fantasy playoffs, it was Amon-Ra St. Brown. He was in like 20 fantasy points every single week. And, he is the centerpiece of the offense in the passing game. Listen, I know they have David Montgomery. I know they have, Gibbs and Laporta, and Williams is emerging, but it just seems like in a PPR format, he just offers you such a nice floor. And by the way, Goff was prior to his time. And the reason why I was high on him this year was Goff prior to his time in Detroit, his number 1 target was Cooper Kupp, who was a primary slot guy who played in and out. That's what Amon-Ra plays. Dan Campbell came over. Where was he from? New Orleans. Who did they feature? Michael Thomas, in and out guy, slot guy, plays a lot in the slot during his time with the Saints. So I love the fact that the coaching staff has built a scheme for a guy like him. The quarterback has tendencies that lean towards the wide receiver. So I think in a full PPR, I think Amon-Ra offers you just such a safe floor in this format.
Yeah. I love it. Derek, why don't you give your thoughts first, and I'll give you mine and then my next pick.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, it was when it came down to my last pick, it was really between Chase and St. Brown, and I love St. Brown, so it's hard for me to pass up on him. But yeah, I have those 2 right there together, and I mean, you can't go wrong either way in my mind. So I love that pick.
Boy, I feel like I've, again, it's knee-jerk reaction, and we have a long time to finalize these things, but I feel like I have him. I do have him much lower. I have him as my 11th overall player, and my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th wide receiver in the first round. And this would have me taking Gibbs and St. Brown on the same team, obviously, in the first round, which is tough. And I think I'm going to maybe shock the airwaves here with my next pick, which I think is a value, but again, 2 teammates in the first round. But are you guys concerned? I don't think we have any problem taking Gibbs in the first round overall. And I think we all agree at some level that St. Brown is there somewhere too. We see this happen per season where teammates, 2 wide receivers or running back wide receiver, something like that, can finish in the top 12 overall, which would be ultimately Derek, I'll go to you first, then Bob. Do you have any concerns with the Lions offense specifically and how Gibbs and St. Brown can both be top 12 value, which they were essentially this year in points per game?
No, not really. I understand your concern and say that I haven't, experienced that myself, but no, these are two really dynamic players. And, there's going to be, as we've seen, there's times when one goes off and the other one's just really good, and the other one goes off, the other one's real good. So I'm really not too worried about them. Both of them, over the course of a season easily can, certainly stay healthy. They're bringing back, first round or at, worst second round value. So I'm not worried about either one of them. No.
Well, the other thing too is Amon-Ra played as an elite separator. So if you look at his value, if you do value-based drafting, he was one of the elite guys in fantasy football. His 20.4 PPR points per game was 2.4 points better than the next tier down of guys that were like basically value-based drafting. I use top 30 running backs and then top 36 wide receivers. So I compare the player to the top 30 running back, the top 36 receiver to give you some type of value-based drafting. So he offered you a pretty nice delta when you jump down to the next, which ironically was the Miami Dolphins running backs and even guys like Justin Jefferson. So he's just, in my opinion, this is all going to rely on who the play caller is. Did they promote Mark Brunell as the QB coach to the OC if Ben Johnson leaves? And how is Mark Brunell in his first stint as a play caller? Like, I have no idea. So I am a little concerned about that. I like continuity, especially early on. But Goff has shown that he's taken a leap as a quarterback. He loves to target the middle of the field. And that's where Amon-Ra St. Brown is. So I would be okay with it personally.
Wow. Absolutely love the Mark Brunell shout out, man. The Jags, when they came up in 96, were one of my favorite teams as a kid. Them and the Panthers came in 95. Kerry Collins and Mark Brunell. Oh man, such a good vibe. I have his jersey actually randomly. Shouts out to lefty quarterbacks. Jamie brings up two good points here, boys. I want to go over real quick before I give him my next thought. First one, can't wait to see where you guys take Laporta. And the next one is, must be too high. I've got St. Brown at 5 or 6 overall. So Jamie, first the comment would be, we're taking St. Brown at 8. We took Gibbs at 6. So like Lions are kind of in that mix right there. Laporta is not going to be a first rounder, at least for me. I don't think any tight end will be, not even Mark Andrews will be a first rounder. I think that was a Kelsey Gronk specific thing that I think is maybe in the past, but brings up a good point. Like, we're not going to get to the second, third rounds of our mock drafts for a couple of weeks, but if Laporta goes, let's say hypothetically top 5 tight end, top 3 tight end, maybe that's a third, fourth rounder. That's 3 Lions in the first 3 rounds. And then David Montgomery maybe goes in what, the 4th or 5th round? Like that's, and then in super flex leagues, Jared Goff might go in the first 5 rounds as well. Like that's pretty extreme. So we're not going over Sam Laporta yet, but we saw this kid come out as a rookie, do the unprecedented and be the number 1 basically with a couple guys out. Down season for Kelsey. Obviously, Mark Andrews got hurt. Hawk got hurt for a while. Kittle's off and on, what have you. So just an interesting point there that Jamie brings up. I like that quite a bit. All right, boys. I'm going to shake it up here a little bit. And as we've gone through this draft and talked about certain players, I'm going to probably change this pick as we go through the summer. I know I will. But when I ran the stats and I was going through this and looking at my top 12, I kept moving them up and up and up, and they ended up in my top 12. So I got to take him here, and it's Devin Achane. And it's Achane. See, Bob, now you got me doing the Achane thing. Damn it. Anyway, Achane, give me a second. I got to find him if he's even in here. There we go. Boom. So he's going to be my 1-9. Now, this is, I think, hot flames for those of you that still believe in Raheem Mostert. And trust me, nobody's actually a bigger fan of Raheem Mostert than I am. I promise you. I have been unapologetically Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson's biggest fans for 5 years for no reason. Bob can attest to that. But running the numbers, and age is going to catch up eventually. Achane did what Mostert did in 5 less games, and he's 8 years younger. eventually that's going to catch up to him. Explosive speed, as we know. He was tied for third with Mostert in PPR fantasy points for the running back position. So points per game, he was fourth overall. He was third in points per game. 963 total yards and 10 touchdowns in 10 games. So let's just automatically put him over 1,000, maybe 1,200, and give him a couple more touchdowns. 1,212 touchdowns is an excellent rookie season by anybody, and he would have been probably number 2 or 3 overall. He had the most 20-plus yard runs in the entire NFL. Tyreek Hill, of course, by far had the most receptions, 56 20-plus yard plays. And then Devin Achane had 20 rushing plays of 20-plus yards, again, in just 10 games. Elite speed by the Dolphins has been absolutely crucial, and Raheem Mostert's one of those guys. So is Jalen Waddle. But I think eventually next year the pendulum shifts a little bit, and Mostert is going to get his work while healthy. But he did the unprecedented this year and stayed healthy. He hasn't for the rest of his career. I don't think it's going to happen. This by far is the most risky first-round pick, absolutely. But in my opinion, this absolutely has the most upside. Because if Mostert goes down or Achane stays healthy for 14 games, becomes that number 1 guy, he could be a top 3 finisher. I firmly believe that because he finished top 4 in points per game and only played 10 games. So very risky. There's 3 or 4 other players in my first round that I don't think are even going to get picked here, so we'll recap those at the end. But Devon Achane is my 3rd running back, my 5th overall player in PPR right now, and he's an absolute steal, in my opinion, at number 9. That's where I've got him. I'm sure this is a surprise to both of you guys. Bob will get your thoughts first, then Derek will get yours and get you into your 4th and final pick of the first round here.
Yeah, I mean, half his games were elite. Like, we're talking 50% of his games were 21 PPR points. That was second best, tied with Kyren Williams. But then if you look over and you look at his bottom out games, he was 50% under 10 PPR points per game. So I'm sorry, subpar was 40%. So 60% of his games were over double digits, but then 50% overall. So like there was only just like 1 game difference between, if he scored double digits, he was going over 21 points. That's basically what that means. Yes, I'm buying Mike McDaniel. I'm buying Tua Tagovailoa. I'm buying this offense. I'm fine with this. He's in my first round. I'm not sweating it at all. I think the other problem is he hasn't proven to stay healthy. He had a preseason injury. Then he got hurt during the season. So it just seems like his injuries are piling up too. You know, these small speed backs in the McDaniel system, a.k.a. Kyle Shanahan, always seem to get hurt, Sky. What's going on? You know, it just seems like it's rolling over from the 49ers. Now, Mostert, by the way, got hurt when it mattered the most in the fantasy playoffs. So games, but then Jeff Wilson pops in for a game or two. But yes, you got to love the upside for this guy. He could be an absolutely winner, of course.
Yeah, and another thing too, really quick. So I'm going with like what I would do on draft day. I hope I'd have the stones to actually pick him at the 9th pick. Maybe I wouldn't do that. We'll see how the summer shakes out. But realistically, ADP-wise, when that shakes out, which we'll start to compare as we get that over the next couple of months, he's probably going to be a mid to late 2nd round pick, I would think, at earliest. So honestly, you're probably not going to have to do what I'm doing right now. I'm bringing him up because I'm super confident in what I saw in a limited sample size as a rookie. So, but Bob, you're absolutely right. As a 49er fan, it's broken my heart all the way back to Carlos Hyde and, you know, these kind of guys, the end of the Frank Gore era. We've had so many elite running backs be elite all the way up to injury. The next guy comes in, they're absolutely elite until they get hurt. Then the next guy comes in, they're elite until they get hurt. Like Jordan Mason has had 2 or 3 incredible games this season when he's had the opportunity. So Salvon Ahmed had a couple great games as well for the Dolphins this year too in relief. So probably risky. And Jamie makes a great point here down about Breece Hall. We'll talk about him in a little bit, obviously. But Achane, it was between Achane and Breece Hall for me at the 9th pick with him available. But with the upside of what I know right now, I like that a lot with this offense coming back. Derek, your thoughts on Achane, and then let's get into your 4th pick.
Yeah, I think he's the right pick here, to be honest with you. And I think this is really about, you know, where he's going to be. He's going to be at the turn. I don't think he's going to slip, you know, far into the 2nd round. And, I really see a lot of parallels between Achane and Gibbs, and just, explosive offense. They've got another running back there who's taking carries. They're more of a passing down back. So let me ask you guys, if Achane went through this season, both rookies, Achane went through this season and he didn't battle the injuries, because Gibbs really didn't get injured. He wasn't really battling injuries so much. It was just more, once he got on the field and started playing, would we have Achane and his potential higher than Gibbs and his potential if they both were healthy through the whole season? What do you think there?
I'll tell you this.
I think so.
Go ahead, Scott.
It would have faded Mostert majorly. Mostert's fine, but if Achane was fully healthy, it would have been more of a 50-50 versus 70-30 with huge plays. That's what we got this year. We got 70-30, and Achane is just incredibly explosive. Bob brought it up. He had massive games. He had some down games, whatever. Gibbs, once he got rolling in week 7, he was more consistent. But, boy, if Achane played 16 games, for example, and even Mostert did too, I have a hard press to think that he wouldn't have outpaced Mostert overall. Mostert had all the touchdowns. He had 20 touchdowns. He had more this season than the rest of his career combined. That's not going to happen. Achane was more realistic and has big plays. So, yes, I absolutely feel like we would be taking Achane over Gibbs. I've got them back-to-back right now. I've got them at 4 and 5 overall. So, yes, I do think that would be the case. Bob?
I would have Achane, whatever. Honestly, I would consider him at 102.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Listen, here's his stat lines before his injury. 18 for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns. 4 catches for 30 yards, 2 touchdowns in that game. Mm-hmm. 8 carries, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns, 11 carries for a 151-1. If you look at Mike McDaniel's scheme, the exotic run concepts and how they basically give their running backs running starts. And this guy, for whatever, he's got the speed, but he just hits the hole perfectly for this offense. Like, if there was no injuries, I would have him at 102 behind McCaffrey, because we saw it before the injury. Then he came back, got hurt again. Then he came back and they kind of eased him in a little bit. He had 17 carries in his first game back in week 13, but then he had 7, 9, 7. And he finally had 14 again. He got 107 yards last week. So, like, this guy he has the most I would say the most upside other than CMC out of any player in fantasy, probably.
Yeah, and that's actually my point. I mean, you made my point really well there, because as we've seen so many times over the course of the offseason, we see narratives shift and prop up players. This is what we expect because they've got the potential. They're in that explosive offense. Achane should be the guy. He should be CMC in Southern Florida. And so I really think that's what we're going to see. I think he's actually going to his draft position is going to go up in my mind, not down. So yeah, I think this is, like I said, I think this is the right pick in this draft at 9. Wow. But I fully agree with Bobby. I think he's going to go, a lot earlier than this, and probably, in the position where we drafted in this draft, Kyren Williams or Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to be in that area. So
wow,
I like this pick at 9. Like I said, I think he's the right pick here.
Great. You guys make me feel a lot better than that. I thought I was kind of shaking the airwaves a little bit. And again, on my own personal rankings, which I'm going off of, I have him at number 5 overall. So for me, just going against the board and whatever, I feel like this is a value because I have him at 5. I'm getting him at 9, whatever. Jamie's over here in the chat talking too. And he, obviously he's a big Breece Hall guy. We'll get there. But considering Breece Hall, where Bobby took Kyren Williams. So again, like, we're talking about a lot of these running backs that have big question marks, but massive upside. And ultimately on draft day, which again, we're 6 months away from, but you have to make these decisions of like shooting your shot at some level. And I don't know that I would have the stones on draft day to pick Achane over, say, Breece Hall or some of these other bona fide studs because of the risk. But if he hits, it comes back tenfold. We got Jahmyr Gibbs in the 4th round last year, and now we're talking about him as a top 5 pick. So it's interesting how it can go that way. We got 3 picks left. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us again tonight. This is kind of turning the page on 23 into 24. Again, this is not a dynasty show. We have the Dynasty Diehards. We want to give them a shout out. They have their own program that is focused specifically on dynasty. So for all your dynasty content, make sure to go check out their episodes here on YouTube, but also again on the podcast. You can download the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast anywhere you listen to your audio. All of our articles always for free on Razzball website. So it's football.razzball.com. And of course, we got a try box tonight because Matty Styles is out on vacation celebrating some dubs, but he'll be back, and we got the quad box rolling for you once a week in the off season as well. So again, we're wrapping up our first mock draft of 2024. This is a single quarterback, 12-team PPR mock draft. We have gone through 9 picks. I'll recap that quickly as we go to the end for those of you just joining. Otherwise, we got 3 picks left. Derek, you're back on the clock. This is your 4th pick, and this would be 110. And then Bob and I will wrap up the first round here. Who do you got at 110 in the PPR?
Yeah, so we've made 9 picks, and that constitutes 9 of my top 10. So I only have 1 player left in my top 10 that we haven't picked yet, and that's Bijan Robinson. And, you know, all the things we just talked about, Achane and Gibbs and Williams, you know, we should be talking about Bijan Robinson that way. I mean, he has the skills and the ability.
Yeah, we should be.
What he doesn't have is, frankly, his head coach, which probably a week from now might be unemployed. So that makes me feel even better getting Bijan here at 10. But yeah, this the same things we just talked about with Achane. I think there's a lot of upside of taking Bijan Robinson here at number 10. You know, of course, if the situation is right for the Falcons and they build on that and realize what they have and lean on that, he's going to be a great pick here this late in the first round. So I'm happy to get Bijan Robinson here at 10 if that's me picking there.
Boy, I hope you're right, Bob.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts here. Arthur Smith, the one thing I talked about earlier the offseason, when I was waffling a little bit, I was hedging on Bijan in my early preseason, was I felt like he was going to be utilized like Christian McCaffrey was his rookie season, you know, and sure enough, Tyler Algier kind of took over that Jonathan Stewart role, that early down grinder. And sure enough, Bijan was not a featured player all three downs, and he finished it was a disappointment. And with Arthur Smith, now McCaffrey made a huge jump his second season. They phased out Jonathan Stewart. However, Tyler Algier is not a 30-year-old back. Tyler Algier is another young, talented running back who's going to earn touches. Now, Arthur Smith could be gone. We don't know. Who's going to be the quarterback next year? We don't know. This all could definitely change with Bijan. I personally don't think I have the stones to take him in round 1 after this season, but I think this is a player who this offseason will matter a lot for him. If they go out and let's say get Justin Fields and they acquire him and you know the Bears go a different direction or something like that, could really change my mind here on Bijan. But overall, just a lot of risk. He just didn't perform well enough this season. But I know he's a rookie, and I'm willing to give him a second chance, maybe in the second round, though.
Yeah, Bob, I agree with you. And look, every single person is pulling for the Falcons offense in fantasy, right? Like we're all still waiting for Kyle Pitts. We are all hoping for Drake London, who also was a top 8 pick. We're all waiting for Bijan to be Jonathan Taylor as a rookie. Jamie's got a stat down here that, you know, rookie running backs increase, you know, about 100 touches in their sophomore season. Would love to see that. But Bob's absolutely right. My 2 concerns, Arthur Smith, I think will be moved on from. I heard a great, radio show today that suggested that maybe curmudgeon-y Bill Belichick goes down to Atlanta because he's got ties with Arthur Blank, who's the owner of the Falcons, but can inherit a great team that just kind of needs like better coaching. And then Arthur Smith may not be a head coach, but he'll pick up an offensive coordinator position somewhere. He's a fine coach. He just didn't do enough excitement for fantasy football purposes, but the Falcons, are still in the race for a playoff spot. So NFL terms, it wasn't terrible. My concern, though, is Tyler Algier, who's a great player in his own right. He played very well when Bijan was down or out. And then Bijan, unfortunately, even with the workload, this is my main concern. Bijan, when he got the massive touches, the great workload, whatever, he just didn't look as amazing as we kind of built him up to be. He's a great running back, whatever. We know what he did at Texas, #1 running back coming out last year, but he didn't look supremely explosive. And the Falcons had one of the top offensive lines in the entire NFL. Now, Justin Fields could be an option, although I think with how things have gone in Chicago, he stays with the Bears. But Russell Wilson could end up there. Kirk Cousins could end up there. Joe Flacco might get a ninth wind and go get another playoff team with Atlanta. If they get a better competent quarterback situation there, they round out that offense with a different mind, maybe this could change everything. But like Achane, I think there's a big risk with Bijan at the #1 pick. But again, if it all does come to fruition, he could be the best running back in fantasy, period. And then you're getting him at a massive value. So, Derek, I don't hate the pick overall. It makes me a little queasy. I've got Bijan at my number 15 player right now, not including any quarterbacks in the single quarterback league. And he is my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th running back. So I'm a little more concerned about Bijan currently, but we'll see what happens. Very quiet, 1,000-yard season, total yards, 8 touchdowns. That's fine. But just 13.5 PPR points per game, not going to get it done in fantasy. So concerned about that a little bit. Bob, let's move on to your 4th and final pick of the first round, which will be 111.
This sucks. Because I should just take A.J. Brown. And I think that's the right play here, but I'm going to take Breece Hall.
Oh.
So
all right. I got something for you on the next pick. How about that?
Yeah. I think so. We kind of saw this. The biggest thing I talk about every single year is avoid players with injuries, right? Now, Breece Hall was good over the second half of the year. Early on, I think a lot of this veteran stuff kind of threw us through a loop because they brought in Dalvin Cook. That was kind of a weird warning sign. Aaron Rodgers was not going to wait for Breece Hall to be up to speed. Then 4 plays into the season, it all just blew up, right? So they went back to riding the running back, riding Breece Hall over the second half of the year, and he finished as a top 15 player in PPR points per game if you look at value-based drafting. So he already was a difference maker. Now you're adding in Aaron Rodgers next year. The other thing, though, I really love is that you started seeing around Breece Hall, they got rid of Michael Carter, which, by the way, is a very underrated aspect of his fantasy season. When they released Michael Carter, no one talked about it. But that freed up passing downs. That turned Breece Hall into an every down back. Who did they just release? Dalvin Cook. He's now gone. Even though he was on a 1-year contract, they have basically isolated Breece Hall, and now he's going to be another year removed from his ACL injury. He's got another guy who could see elite ceilings. Now, Aaron Jones never got to RB1 overall ceiling upside, but he had a 20 PPR points per game season with Aaron Rodgers, but he did that with sharing the backfield with guys like Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon. I don't see that happening with Breece Hall. Now with no Michael Carter, no Dalvin Cook next season, Breece Hall will be an every down back in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense, so I do like that. And on top of all that, even though Aaron Rodgers missed this season, the entire offense got a year under in Nathaniel Hackett. So when Aaron Rodgers comes back, he's already got the experience with Hackett. The rest of the team does. So that continuity should vault him up draft boards. And that's why I like him as a first-round pick.
Thoughts on Breece Hall, Derek?
Yeah, I don't hate it. He's the next running back off the board for me. So it makes sense here. If I'm at the end of the draft, I want to come out with a running back and a wide receiver. So I'm happy with Breece Hall. There's not A.J. Brown is the next guy on my board. Not to, I guess, maybe jump ahead and what you may or may not be doing at the turn, but Breece Hall is right there for me. So I don't mind this pick, and he's right. I mean, they're going to lean on him. The Jets. They're gonna make some moves this year to, kind of put back together what they were hoping to do this year, and he's going to be a key focal point of that. He's going to be one full season beyond his injury, which we know for running backs is a major step forward. So he's in line to have a really good season, and if you're building your fantasy team around him at 11, then you're probably in pretty good shape.
I love it, Bob. I have A.J. Brown and Breece Hall as my back-to-backs right here too, and basically I was going to take the other guy. So I like it. Breece Hall is next up for me as well. He is my 7th overall player, so it's a bit of a value for me. He's my 5th running back right now, 23rd in rush attempts, but 1st in running back targets and yards. So Bob just said they released Dalvin Cook. They're going to pick up some running back. They have to have depth, but he's obviously the bona fide number one. This offensive line started really hot and got hurt throughout the season and ended up dismal. The defense is very good for the Jets. They're going to be in tight games that with a more competent offense in general, they could have won. Aaron Rodgers will put them over the top with that, assuming he comes back fully healthy and stays healthy. Also, spoiler alert, and I hate to jump ahead too far. I said this as soon as it happened last year when Rodgers went to the Jets. I thought they would pick up Adams last year. They didn't. I think it's a foregone conclusion that they get Adams next year. With Adams and Breece Hall, and then they get Wilson as well on that offense, they're going to be absolutely dominant. So Breece Hall, I think, is going to be just fine. So again, great pass-catching running back. I don't think people give him credit for right now, but he was 23rd in rush attempts, 1st in targets and yards. So I love that. 2nd in running back receptions. Again, Rodgers is returning. The O-line can get healthy. Adams, I think, joins the Jets. I'm not just hyperbole. I really believe that's going to happen. And this is something that I don't think we're taking enough stock in, and I think it accounts for Javonte Williams as well when we get to him. 2nd year removed from his injury. Breece Hall had his much earlier. So he came back in the second half of the season, started looking like the Breece Hall over this last month that we thought we were going to get in the first half. Now he's going to have a whole off season training, getting more strength in that leg after the tears. So I think he's going to come back with a vengeance. And for what it's worth, he did come out publicly today on X and was basically like, mark my words, I'm going to be a top running back, make a Pro Bowl, all pro, blah, blah, blah. Look, I appreciate the confidence. We can't just make that happen automatically. But nonetheless, I think he's got a chip on his shoulder and something to prove, because let's not forget, before Bijan, it was Breece Hall 2 years ago as a number one guy. So I appreciate that he will be that guy. And I think getting him at 11 here is absolutely a pick. And Jamie just throwing a stab here, making up for that Kyren reach. Nonetheless, both guys are first round picks. I like it. And Jamie, before I get into it, I'm going to answer this one really quick. This is more of a dynasty thing. We'll get into these players later. Honestly, looking at the draft board, believe it or not, first of all, there's no chance that Brock Bowers falls to the Falcons. They're not going to take him with Pitts. I think they're going to be fine there. The Falcons have the 9th pick, and they're not going to move up, I think, to get another first-round tight end. But the Jets have the pick right before him, and they have the 8th pick. And I think what could round out that offense with an already great defense would be Brock Bowers at tight end. They get Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, and Aaron Rodgers next year. They're going to be an absolute nightmare, especially with that defense. So I think Brock Bowers actually goes to the Jets if he even falls that far, which I don't think he does. All right, folks, this is going to be the last pick of the first round, and we're going to get out of here. I'm going to set the tone. I've already told you that I was going to take the other guy, so I will do that. Boom, A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is my final pick here. That's my 4th pick, and he rounds out our first round. Guys, I'm going to look ahead just a little bit and look at maybe some alternate names that you might have had in your first round that weren't picked overall, and maybe that would round out the next 4 or 5 picks kind of in general. So have a name or two in the holster after I'm done with this that we might pick if you were on the turn coming back, who you might look at. But A.J. Brown was going to be my pick right before this. I almost took him over Achane, but I went with Achane, and then I was going to go Breece Hall. So A.J. Brown, look, man, he's absolutely dominant, and 6th in points per game in PPR, 3rd in receiving yards behind only Ceedee Lamb and Tyreek Hill, just 7 touchdowns this year, right? He gets over double-digit touchdowns. I think that he surpasses this upside. He could be top, 5 pick. The tush push, brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it. We'll see if there's an actual rule on that. Now, they can, of course, still QB sneak, and they'll be very good at that, but they just can't push from behind, which is the difference. If that gets outruled, and for some reason, they might be having a different offensive philosophy a little bit. And as we know, to the chagrin of most of us, Swift came up short in the red zone, which became Jalen Hurts every single time. If that goes the other direction, they have more receiving touchdowns like they did 2 years ago. A.J. Brown could have another uplift there and, kind of an always squeaky wheel guy. So I think A.J. Brown is still a first-round pick, and he just makes it into our first round at the 12 slot there. So I know that Bob was kind of teetering on them. So Bob, will go with you first with your thoughts, and then I'll go to Derek. And then, guys, again, I'm going to ask you for maybe just an alternate name or two that you had kind of bubbling in that first round that we didn't happen to mention. So, Bob, your thoughts on A.J. Brown here at the 12?
Okay, just want a quick trivia for you guys. A.J. Brown, over the final 8 games, was the wide receiver what? Derek, what do you think? What was he the wide receiver what over the final 8 games of 2023?
Disappointing. So he was probably around 18. Wide receiver 18.
I'll go lower, actually, 24.
26.
Hey.
He wasn't even a top 24 wide receiver in PPR points per game, averaging 13.5 points per game. Like, he was on a historic pace early on, and honestly, he made me look pretty stupid because I said I'm taking Amon-Ra and Ceedee Lamb before him pre-draft. But sure enough, they kind of turned into a pumpkin over the second half of the year. I guess defenses started playing him a little different. They wanted to force. I mean, Dallas Goedert over that time frame was also out, and he still wasn't playing well without Dallas Goedert. So whatever it was with Jalen Hurts and company, maybe something got switched up. It made me a little worried about him. He's still a first-round pick. I mean, he's still one of the elite guys in fantasy football, but that's an 8-game sample size where he's not even a top 24 wide receiver. That's very alarming. So, there isn't a lot of options there other than A.J. Brown if you want to just throw out names, but let's get into Derek's thoughts first, but there's not that many other guys that you probably would take over A.J. Brown left, so I can understand the pick here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he was in my top 12 and rightfully so. 2 other names that are close for me, and, we'll see how it shakes out as we continue this mock. But, we just talked about potentially Devontae Adams going to the Jets. I mean, that's got to give him a big boost, that he's going to be close to top first round pick. And also Keenan Allen. We didn't even sniff Keenan Allen today, but he was such an explosive receiver still. He was healthy. We get Herbert back at quarterback, and if the Chargers can figure it out. Of course, Austin Eckler's not in the first round here anywhere, but that's a topic for another day. Keenan Allen, he's probably still close to a top first round pick for me. So it'd be interesting to see where he shakes off as we continue this draft. But yeah, those are 2 names, and then of course, no quarterbacks, no tight ends in the first round, and that's right. I mean, there shouldn't be in this setup. So I think we're right there. So yeah, two names, Adams and Allen, and no quarterbacks, no tight ends. And I think we did a pretty fair job.
Keenan Allen averaged 4.5 PPR points more than the wide receiver 12 this season. 4.5 points. Yeah. And we're all, he's going to be past his 30 mark now. Probably, I think he's going to be 32. By the way, we did a big time age analysis in the off season last year. Go check out that article. It's not like they go from 21 points to 12. It's like a 10 to 15% drop off year over year. But if you take 10 for 50% off his production from this year, he's still going to be a top 5 receiver next year. Yeah. So I'm curious, by the way, I think Dan Quinn makes a ton of sense for the Chargers. This is just a different topic. You bring him in, maybe if he has a good relationship with Kellen Moore, you keep Kellen Moore as the OC because they both were in Dallas together. Quinn can maximize the talent on defense. Kellen Moore can build on his rapport with Justin Herbert. And then you might convince me to pick Keenan Allen in the first round if he comes back next year.
Yeah, and again, Mike Williams gone, right? Josh Palmer, Mike Williams will be gone most likely next year. They tried to sign an extension, but with this injury, I just don't think it's going to work out. And then you have, Quentin Johnston, who didn't really come on yet. We'll see what happens in year 2. Joshua Palmer is a good favorite, but Austin Eckler, again, fading out a little bit. We'll see what happens with Keenan Allen. Great pick. Bob, did you have any alternate players in general that were bubbling in that 15 to 12 range that just didn't make the cut in this particular draft, but you might see in round 1?
Well, I think the one guy that it's mostly running backs for me. It's like the Kamara, by the way. Kamara was a top, 8 player in PPR points per game when he came back. He'll be a little bit older, but the offense, he still was very good in this format. And so he's someone that comes up. Jonathan Taylor, by the way, Shane Steichen, that run game, we saw it with Zach Moss. Jonathan Taylor could be absolutely – think about him and Anthony Richardson together next year if they can get that running game going. I think he does cap his PPR upside because I don't see Anthony Richardson checking down that much. But the games that he played with Zach Moss was pretty good, by the way. So he would be a guy. And then, of course, I got to shout out Saquon Barkley. I think Brian Daboll, we'll see what they do with Barkley if they bring him back. But Daboll has proven that he's a good offensive mind. They have to figure out what they're going to do with Daniel Jones. I still think they need to go get an alpha number one. I would love for them to get T. Higgins or a Mike Evans type player to really kind of solidify that passing game a little bit. But Barkley, I think if everything comes back again and they do go get an improvement at receiver as well, I might be buying Barkley next year too as a borderline first round pick.
Yeah, don't freak. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be out there too, man. Like, talk about a good clubhouse guy. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I thought he'd be moving on maybe for Tennessee, but you got Adam Thielen, who's an option maybe as well, but whatever. We'll get into those names. We talked about Alvin Kamara. He actually is my 12th player, and we didn't pick him. So I have Bijan at my 15, which I already mentioned. So for me, I'd flip basically Bijan and Kamara, but I like the pick from Derek there with Bijan. Kamara led all running backs in receptions again with 75 receptions, and he missed 3 games. He missed 3 games, and he led all running backs in receptions. If Derek Carr comes back and he's that guy, we know he's going to dump it down consistently. In PPR-specific leagues, Alvin Kamara is still elite, absolutely. Running back 3 in PPR points per game with just 6 touchdowns. Folks, he's had double-digit touchdowns, and he's had 18 touchdowns multiple times in his career. He had just 6 touchdowns this year, and he was still 3rd in PPR points per game. He had 1,100 total yards. I think, the Saints come back as is with Michael Thomas probably gone or at least healthy, whatever. And then you got another year of Chris Olave and whatever they're going to do there at wide receiver. I think it's going to be great. Kendre Miller got brought up earlier. I like that. Maybe if he stays healthy, but Alvin Kamara is obviously that guy, at least for another year. He'll be 28. So will Christian McCaffrey. So we'll keep an eye on that. But Kamara for me is a top 12 pick. We talked about Devontae Adams. Any day, I think he goes to the Jets after the season. I like that a lot. He's top 12 if he goes to the Jets with Rodgers. We'll revisit that later. Bob, I'm shocked that you didn't bring up your boy Cooper Kupp. And I think you could even make you could even make a note maybe for Puka Nacua. So we'll see what happens when Matt comes back on the program. Maybe he'll give Puka a shout out. But either way, the only concern with Cooper Kupp, which are big ones, are age, which again, with him and Keenan Allen being at that 30 bubble, I think it's fine for those guys, but it's age and health concerns with Cooper Kupp. But when he's healthy, he's still an absolute dog. So going to be tough to see what happens with him to come draft season, but keep him in mind. And then Travis Etienne, not a first round pick, but top 15, 6th in PPR points per game, 16.5 points per game, 6th in running back targets, 5th in running back receiving yards, and just 1 single receiving touchdown with all that work. I think that goes, higher next year, and 11 rushing touchdowns on the 4th most carries. So I think the Jags are going to take another step next year with Trevor Lawrence when he comes back healthy. And, Calvin Ridley is, whatever, maybe not that number 1. Christian Kirk comes back healthy. We'll see what happens with Evan Ingram and another running back or wide receiver there with Zay Jones. So I like ETN in my 16 to 15 range, but probably not top 12. But that's going to round out our number 1 mock draft for the season. This is our first round, which I'm going to recap again for everybody. Again, at the number 1 slot here, we had the fantasy GOAT for the last 5 years. That is Christian McCaffrey. No surprise there. I personally would take Ceedee Lamb early, but love Christian McCaffrey. Again, this is full PPR. And then we went with Tyreek Hill. No questions there. But again, I would take Ceedee Lamb. I was shocked to get him at 3. I'm happy with that. Top 3 picks, CMC, Tyreek Hill, Ceedee Lamb. 4, Justin Jefferson. Then Kyren Williams. And Devon Achane, which I went ahead and took a risk on maybe, but the guys seem to agree with me on that one. Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, and A.J. Brown to round out the top 12. Guys, really quick, just a high-level look at the top 12. Say you were putting together this entire draft by yourself. Who's a player or two you would flip-flop? Like maybe Kyren Williams is way too early, you take Breece Hall before him, or vice versa. With these 12 particular players, what's a player or two that you would alternate or flip around a little bit in your personal rankings? Derek, I'll have you go first and then Bob.
Yeah, so for me, it's more just my preference, and like I said earlier, I like, especially in the PPR, I like wide receivers or high volume wide receivers a little more than running backs. So I would probably, if I was going to make a change, I would move up Chase and St. Brown over Williams and Gibbs. I would just flip flop, 5 and 6 with 7 and 8, and I'm okay. I'm okay with those 5 running backs. It's personal preference in what order, but personally for me, I would prefer those 2 wide receivers before the running backs if I'm building a team.
Bob, same question.
I would say just Bijan would be the only guy I'm worried about in the top 12. I'd probably have him closer as like a high-end second-round pick. Probably plop in Alvin Kamara. I think he's kind of earned it. We saw that PPR floor that he offered this season. Derek Carr was kind of learning the system and trying to get his footing. But if he's back, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, I know Rashid Shaheed I think he's a free agent. I don't know if he's unrestricted or not, but they're putting together something decent there in New Orleans. So I think Kamara will be solid too. So I would probably put Kamara at the back of the first round here.
I agree with that. Quick question here before we get out. Hypothetically, Davante Adams does become a Jet. We've got 2 sets of teammates. Actually 3 sets of teammates in the first round here. We have Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane. We have Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then hypothetically, we've got Breece Hall and maybe Adams, if you would take him in the first round. Are you guys comfortable taking 2 Jets in the first round, assuming that actually pans out? Derek?
Yeah, I'm not, if it works out the way we're kind of hypothesizing there, yeah, I don't mind that because there's plenty to go around with Breece Hall and Adams in an offense that explosive. I mean, we saw explosive offenses this year, Miami and in Detroit, and it's reflected here in these picks. And if we're thinking that the Jets could duplicate that, in that scenario, then yeah, I'm fine with it.
Bob?
I like how we have to play this game, Sky's game. Sky's like, all right, here's my hypothetical. Davante Adams goes to the Jets. It's like, well, I think Russell Wilson goes to the Raiders. Antonio Pierce stays. Davante Adams wants to play for him. And then they bring over Darrell Bevel, who's the QB coach who used to OC for Seattle. And I think that's what happens. Darrell Bevel's the new OC. Russell Wilson comes in. He stays. We're all excited. Antonio Pierce wins Coach of the Year. But yes, if he goes to the Jets, I think the problem is Garrett Wilson. Like, how much of a rapport did Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers get early on last season to where Davante Adams comes back in, who, by the way, will be over 30? Is Davante Adams going to be that big of the alpha over Garrett Wilson? Or will they kind of not, I don't want to say cancel each other out, but will they cap each other just a little bit to make them more of like a second round pick? I don't know. I just don't want to discount Garrett Wilson too much here. But if Davante Adams as a Jet, all I know is all my super flex dynasty leagues with Aaron Rodgers is going to look real nice. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. If Adams does go, there's no chance. I mean, Adams and Rodgers have one of the best rapports of wide receiver quarterbacks in NFL history, period. And yes, the offseason was cool, but they didn't play a regular season together, Wilson and Rodgers. So like clubhouse, like locker room shit, yeah, they're probably homies. But nothing like Adams and Rodgers were in Green Bay. So if that comes over, I don't think it's close. And but again, we see 2 wide receivers on a single team be top 12 wide receivers. And let's think back to Jordy Nelson and Davante Adams back in the day with Rodgers. That could absolutely happen with the Jets. So I wouldn't discount Wilson too much, but I do think that Adams would absolutely be that guy. We got a couple questions here and we'll get out.
Well, one other point on the Jets before we move on. One thing I'm really going to be watching during the offseason is what they do to that offensive line. I mean, that offensive line, coming into the season was atrocious, and we saw what happened with Rodgers right away. And and it affected Breece Hall too. So yeah, they really got to do something to beef up that offensive line. And if that's something that they accomplish as well as some of these other things, then then I am very comfortable with all these scenarios we're talking about. But if they fail to really upgrade that offensive line, then I'm probably not going to inflate my Jets, just because of those scenarios that we just talked about.
Dig it. All right, y'all. We're going to take just 5 more minutes or so, answer a couple more of your questions. So if you do have any questions here regarding our draft or any of your keeper picks, or maybe you got to start sit heading into week 18, which you shouldn't. But if you do, go ahead and let us know really quick. We'll take a couple more minutes to round this out. Daniel, good evening. Glad that you could made us late. Appreciate it. We did answer your question off the bat. Bodybuilding Weekly is in as well. And of course, Jamie always pulling the hype. We appreciate y'all. So one more time, we had CMC, Tyreek Hill, Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Kyren Williams, Gibbs, Chase, St. Brown, Achane, Bijan, Breece Hall, and A.J. Brown as our first round. We're going to keep that first round. Our next mock draft, we're going to give you the second round as well and see how that starts trickling out over the next couple of weeks. Bodybuilding Weekly wants to know, guys, I'll throw it to you. Bob, we'll go to you first. Would you take – we talked about Keenan Allen, and that's when this question came up. So as of right now, again, very early, we'll see what happens as things develop. Maybe Stephon Diggs isn't even in Buffalo next season. We'll see what happens. But as things are right now in our predictions, are you going to take Keenan Allen, Diggs, and DJ Moore? What order do you have those three heading into next year as of right now, Bob?
Man, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with Stephon Diggs. That Bills passing attack down the stretch. Talk about like bad numbers. I mean, Diggs fell off a cliff. Just like AJ Brown, probably worse. And I think, Joe Brady, with the LSU days looked like the next big thing, and then he flopped in Carolina. But he looked like he leaned more on the run a little bit, and that affected Diggs. But at the same time, that's what you get for you. They play in Buffalo, and that's what's going to happen in December sometimes, I guess. But listen, Keenan Allen was such a difference maker at his age 31 campaign. And listen, we broke this down in much detail this offseason. You could probably expect about a 10 to 15% production dip year over year. But Keenan Allen has the longevity because he plays a slot role, a short A-dot role, similar to Reggie Wayne, Larry Fitzgerald types that extended their prime into their 30s. So I think you still got a year or two of elite Keenan Allen, as long as Kellen Moore is retained. I think if Moore comes back, Justin Herbert doesn't have to learn a new system and all that stuff. I think I'm all in on Keenan Allen over both these guys. After that, I'm going to go Moore, just because we just give them the rapport. If Luke Getsy comes back and they keep Justin Fields and they have another year in the system, the question does come, though, do they go after Marvin Harrison? I know a lot of people are talking about them going after a top receiver. Do they go get a second alpha? Because I don't think they have the pass volume to support DJ Moore and another good player. I think a lot of that has to do with DJ Moore being the only guy in town outside of Cole Kmet. So, listen, this is going to be a huge question mark going all off season, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, Derek, what do you think happened with Diggs? Do you think he's going to be? I mean, why? Josh Allen's about to enter his prime. You can't trade his best player, can you? And Gabe Davis is a free agent.
Yeah, I'm really. This one baffles me as well. I mean, there's so much talent there, and they appear to at least have such a good rapport, and then just the wheels fell off. I mean, I'm hoping this doesn't turn into a Antonio Brown type situation where he goes somewhere else and just loses his mind. But this is really baffling. You don't understand why he's fallen off the cliff this far. And if it's a character issue or something, it's going to be really interesting to see where he ends up next year to make any judgments with Diggs. But yeah, to get to Bodybuilder's question, I'm all in on Keenan Allen over these two as well. I too really like DJ Moore, especially if the Bears keep Fields. There's a connection there, and I think this could be a sneaky good wide receiver pick for someone coming up in our mock draft. Assuming the quarterback situation is favorable for the team and for DJ Moore. So I like Allen, Moore, and then Diggs in this scenario as well, in that order.
He's wide receiver 42 over the second half of the year. 42. That was Diggs over the second half. Wild.
Yeah, and he was a first round pick. He was a first round pick this year.
Oh yeah.
And look how far he fell. So yeah,
he's under contract till 2027. So they can't just outright release him. He's got a lot of money. He just signed a contract with Buffalo. And honestly, he's playing with an MVP candidate at quarterback. Like, it's going to be like, what situation does he think he's going to go to where he's going to be the alpha number one with a good quarterback?
Yeah. I mean, if Mike Evans walks out of Tampa Bay, I mean, there might be
Baker. Well,
I don't know. I mean, hey, put two fiery personalities together and see what you get.
Oh my God.
Matthew Styles just jumped off that cruise ship, like wherever he's at right now. He's in excitement. Here, Baker Mayfield, better than Josh Allen take from Derek. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, it's so sad. I don't have enough time to give my love for the once incredible Antonio Brown in fantasy football, who won me 5 years worth of fantasy championships. That'll be a different conversation someday. But first of all, shouts out to Julio Jones for 2 touchdowns when nobody played him in the fantasy championship week. The comparison though, Derek, is oddly fair with AB. Because as insane as Antonio Brown was when he was in his prime with the Steelers, specifically, when Stephon Diggs came out, shouts out to Matt Harmon, who kind of invented and put reception perception as a fantasy tool on the map. You may hear that term and tool in the industry in general. It's one of the best tools in fantasy, period. It's really been a landmark for the industry. But Matt Harmon came out and did that, right? And Antonio Brown for years was like the number one wide receiver in most metrics. Number 2, though, was like Stephon Diggs, like as a youngster. And they were comparing him and being like, I'm not saying Stephon Diggs is Antonio Brown, but metrically, and now Brandon Ayuk is that guy, which is crazy to think about. But then you had like the fallout, and Bob, it's not just a number dip and like the weather. The weather has not been insane in Buffalo yet. It hasn't. That's not an excuse. Yes, they're running the ball more, but Stephon Diggs is getting a 36% target share. Now, they're not throwing the ball a ton, so that doesn't mean his volume is crazy. But of the passes that Josh Allen throws, 36% is insane for any wide receiver to get, right? He's just not turning it up like they did last season or at the beginning of this season. And the worst part of this, which is the Antonio Brown comparison, is he's done the squeaky wheel 3, 4, 5 times. And then he comes back with a decent game, whatever. The problem is now he's doing squeaky wheel stuff, complaining, making rants, saying his shit, throwing his coach and his quarterback under the bus, and then not producing the following weeks. Ceedee Lamb did it. He went off the rest of the season. A.J. Brown did it, went off. We see wide receivers do this all the time. DK Metcalf did it, went off. He's not doing it, Stephon Diggs, which is a concern. So you're right. They're tied up. He can't go anywhere else. There's plenty of teams that need an alpha wide receiver, but they probably don't have an alpha quarterback or the money to bring him in.
So
Jacksonville.
here's a scenario.
Okay, great. But
I got a scenario for you.
Giants, fine. They need a quarter. Well,
no, I got a scenario for you. Stephon Diggs is traded to the Cowboys.
All right.
To be the number 2 is Ceedee Lamb, and he teams back up with his brother, who's coming back from an ACL injury.
Love the idea. The problem is
quarterback.
I love the take, Derek. My only concern is guys like that who are still in their prime, right? He's not over the hill looking for a job. He's in his prime still, and with the ego that Stephon Diggs has, I don't see him at all being a number 2 hypothetically. Now, the Cowboys offense and Dak Prescott could make both of those guys number 1 wide receivers.
Yeah,
right.
But
to think of Stephon Diggs as the number 2, whatever. But look, Jerry's got the money, so that's not a crazy take that they would do that. And I do like the brother combo, right? That would be fun for them. And look, he wants to be on another winner. They would get him out of the AFC. I don't think the Bills would hate trading him to a team like that. So I think the Cowboys would make sense, but holy smokes, that would be fireworks if you could make it happen. But to answer this question quickly, and Bob, will let you wrap up. We got another question. We'll get out of here. Keenan Allen for me, easily the number 1 in this pick. I'm going to go DJ Moore as well right now. Number 8 overall, finally hit that top 10 we've been waiting for years. Massive games with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields did enough down the stretch, and Bears fans literally chanted, "We want Fields," down the stretch. So unfortunately, Matt Styles was not in the crowd that night to counter that. So the Bears probably will bring back Justin Fields. And if so, I think that's massive for DJ Moore. And then Stephon Diggs, as of right now, is a distant third in these three. Bob, final thoughts on this conversation. We'll get moving.
Just for more Antonio Brown parallels, Stephon Diggs will be 31 next season when the season starts. That's the year that everything fell off for Antonio.
Whoa.
So and on Derek's point, both Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup have outs in their contract this offseason where the Cowboys can get off their long term. So if they want to drop both those guys, make the trade to get Diggs, there you go.
You heard it here, folks. January 4th, Derek Favret calls it. Stephon Diggs to the Cowboys. Let's make it happen in March when everyone blows up and we'll have Derek on the books. I love that. Question here from Jamie. We got two and then we'll get out. Wilson over Adams, ? Or would they both be downgraded to second round? So would you guys both take Adams over Wilson, assuming that they're both teammates?
I would, yes. But probably, both second rounders for me. But I would take Adams over Wilson.
Yeah, in 2016, Nelson had his final really good season with the Packers, and Adams was emerging. And I still think Rodgers favors his guy, and I think that will still be Devontae Adams. And I think Adams still has a lot in the tank, so I would favor Adams.
Love that, and I agree. And then final one here, final question: who has the best fantasy football content? The only correct answer is Rasball. Shouts out to Jamie. Thank you so much, man, for the support always. And big up for your program as well. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in for a long one here on Thursday night. Usually we have the Tuesday quad box. But look, folks, this off season, we're going to be floating a little bit on our days of the week. So make sure you follow us everywhere for Rasball fantasy football content. That's Rasball NFL. And you can hit all of us up individually. Sky Guasco, SKYGUASCO. Derek Favret, that's Derek _FAVRET. The sleeper goat ×2. And then Bobby Lamarco at Bobby Lamarco, LAMARCO for the podcasters. And of course, we want to give a shout out to our brother Matty Styles at Styles08. Not able to attend the program tonight, but he will be back soon on a much needed vacation. So big up to our boy Styles, who'll be back soon. Thank you to everybody tuning in. Of course, always Bodybuilding Weekly, Jamie, and Daniel always jumping in the thread, and everybody else for tuning in for us this evening. We'll catch you next time on the Rasball Fantasy Football Show. Make sure to hit up and let us know what you think about our mock draft. If we missed out on anybody, we'll be going through our second or third or fourth or fifth throughout the rest of the off season. And of course, we're not going to do a Sunday live show on Sunday. We're done. Week 18 should not be a championship week. However, we are men of the people. So if you have questions in week 18, make sure to hit us up in the personal DMs. We're more than happy to help you with individual questions, keeper questions, any kind of dynasty trades last minute. We will help you individually, but we're not going to be doing a Sunday live show. So sleep in, those West Coasters jumping on with us at 8 a.m. in the morning. But we will be with you for the rest of the offseason. We're going to have a fun draft pick coming up for the playoffs as well. So final thoughts, we'll go round robin and we'll end it. Derek, final thoughts on the mock draft or what we're looking for in the offseason?
Yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. It'll be fun to build these teams and then ultimately to see what the real teams do and how this changes over the spring and summer with the draft and all the free agency that's bound to happen and hopefully a few trades as well. So good start. I think we've got 12 good franchises getting ready to build and let's have some fun with it.
Babo.
Thank God we didn't do 3 rounds. That's all I can tell you. I'm glad we did that. I will be back tomorrow. We're actually doing a very fun show. We're going to do week 18 player props based on incentives in players' contracts. So tomorrow, me and Ben will be on at 5 p.m. PST. We're actually breaking down every single player incentive. That's a bonus. So if a player gets 65-yard reception in the season, they get a $250,000 bonus. We're going to break those down tomorrow, talk about the player props, and also key milestones. So there's going to be records potentially on the line this weekend. We want to bet those player props, bet those over. So join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. PST. Me and Ben will break down all those on the Rasball Fantasy YouTube channel.
Those are huge for DFS, folks. You might get a rando guy that you wouldn't play maybe at this point of the season, but you're going to have a guy force-feeding targets. There's a great clip that goes around this time of year. I'm sure you'll see it on social media. I think Gronkowski needed 9 receptions or something with the Bucks, and he and Brady had a talk like early game, and Brady literally just gave him like 6 3-yard comebacks in a row to make sure that he got his money.
Dude.
Antonio Brown had one too. There's a lot of guys out there that like, look, they need 35 rushing yards or 5 or 6 receptions, and they're going to get hyper targeted, hopefully to get that money. Go ahead, Bob.
No, the best is they talked about that play. I remember it was Gronk was like, I need one more catch. And the game was already done. Brady went back in with Gronk. They threw like a 1-yard out route to Gronk for the catch. And then they both left the game. It was so funny. They're like, all right, we're done. Gronk didn't come back in. That was it. It was awesome. Yeah. So that's the point though. We're going to break down all those tomorrow. It's going to be a good show.
Player incentives mean a lot. And of course, we're coming back for the NFL playoffs as well. All right, folks, it's been an absolute blast. Once again, Happy New Year. Happy 2024. We got big things coming for you all off season. And of course, this summer as well in the Razzball Fantasy Football Show. It has been an absolute blessing for my man, Derek Favret, the boss, Bobby Lamarco, and our boy, Matty Styles off air. I am your host, Sky Guasco. We'll catch you next time on the Razzball Fantasy Football Show, and come and join Bob tomorrow. Everyone have a wonderful night. We'll catch you next time.